Hello everyone, thank you for joining me on the Onward Education podcast today. I am wearing my communication shirt because that is what we are talking about today and how communication looks different for everyone. And if you think about it, that makes sense for our kids, for our friends, for our family members. We all communicate in different ways. So it shouldn't be surprising that our children have unique ways of conveying their thoughts and feelings to us as well. And the most important thing for us to recognize right off the bat is that communication is not always words. And we know that in our heads. We know that body language, those types of things are going to convey messages, but sometimes we forget to look deeper. So that's what I'd like to chat with you about today. And this topic was spurred on by a student that I was working with this past week. And I was working in the classroom and helping a few different students about 3/4 way through the period after lunch. So everyone had settled, everyone was working. And yeah, about 3/4 the way through the period, I noticed that my student, I say my student because he really is a student that I absolutely adore and I've worked with him before. And I noticed that he was starting to fidget, but not just move. He was starting to take his ruler, take the pencil, and spinning around the ruler using the pencil as the pivot in the middle. So I could tell that he was getting agitated, and he wasn't able to stop when I asked him to. He wasn't able to stop when I said, you really could hurt someone like that. So we talked about this last week and saying, what do we do when our kids say no? And this is similar, but it's different because we're talking about communication today. And my student was trying to communicate with me in that moment. He was trying to tell me that he needed my attention, if only briefly, whether that was to ask for help or to tell me about his day. I wasn't sure, but I knew in that moment that he was communicating with me, and that was why he wasn't stopping with the ruler. It wasn't just that he was trying to cause a problem in the classroom, and I know he really didn't want to hurt anyone with it. So what I decided to try was to ask him if he could help me with what I needed to work on. So I was working on a project for an upcoming lesson for writing, and I was folding and making lines on paper for this upcoming Halloween project. And all of a sudden he jumped on board. He said, yeah, ma'am, I'll help you with that. He was folding, he was taking his ruler and making sure it was all spaced out properly. He really just needed my attention for a few moments, and he was willing to help me in order to get it. So he knew that if he kept on swinging the ruler, he was going to get my attention in a negative way. But what I needed to show him was that he could have my attention in a positive way. So that's really what I wanted to discuss today, is the importance of recognizing that when we see behaviors that are not necessarily what we're looking for, maybe even outright negative, we need to recognize that as a form of communication. And that can be hard, especially if the behavior could potentially be dangerous. In this case, it wasn't something that was necessarily going to lead to anything too aggressive, but I know, and I've been in situations with students where things can escalate quite quickly. And that's when it's a little harder for us to remember that the behavior is still a form of communication. And if we can look at that behavior as being just that, information, communication from our kids, sometimes we're able to look at it through a more clear lens that allows us to get to the bottom of the situation and figure out what need is not being met. And that's often what leads to our being able to de-escalate the situation. So that is my takeaway for today, everyone. I want you to really hone into the experience with your child, and when those behaviors surface, try asking yourself, what is my child trying to tell me in this moment? Am I recognizing the message they're trying to send me? And if I'm not, can I either ask them to be more clear? Can I ask them what they need? Or like I did, just try different things until you hit something where you recognize, oh, that's what they needed. They needed my attention for a moment. They needed a hug. They needed a quiet space. Sometimes we have to do trial and error to figure out what our kids need, but behavior is communication. And when we remember that, it puts us in a better position to be able to support our kids.